I'm here with Chris Darwen. I'm Chris Mumford, and we're Thinking Fan Football Club. Chris, I want to have a conversation with you on some things worth talking about. Is the Man City revival real? Have they fixed the problems they've needed to fix?
Well, according to Pep, they have, and it's all about running less, which you thought is the absolute opposite of what a team like Man City seem to be trying to do when you watch how them play. But Guardiola said, I think it was earlier in the week, that one of the main reasons why they are starting to perform in a more stable manner now is that they haven't got players bombing forwards in all areas like you've seen them doing over the last couple of seasons. So there's a more thoughtful, structured. Not Pep's always been structured. I mean, he's all about positional play, but it's certainly more thoughtful and not as gung ho in the attacking third. And one thing that's really been a big part of the revival is also the reintroduction of John Stones, as we wrote about a couple of weeks ago. His partnership that's developing with Ruben Diaz is really giving them a solid foundation. And it's not that City were shipping goals left, right, and centre. I mean, their defensive performance in terms of goals conceded before Stones came back into the team was certainly nothing to be alarmed about, short of the abnormality of the defeat against Leicester. But it's just given them a more solid footing. And you can see things like Stones playing means that Rodri's being able to have a better impact in midfield. They've got more confidence in the midfield game as well. And seeing someone like Kevin De Bruyne now playing in that false nine position, everyone was saying, "Oh, City needs strikers." But him playing there now seems to have opened them up to all kinds of new possibilities in the attacking phase too. So yeah, this City revival for me is serious, and it's true. And if I had to sort of put my money on the table right now, I'd say City will be the team that win the Premier League this season.
Interesting. Well, I do think their striker situation still needs to be addressed. Of course, there are rumors swirling around that Aguero will be going to Spain. I find that a bit of a head scratcher. I just don't know if anybody's got any money to make any moves like that. I also know that they're going after Locatelli as a central defensive midfielder from Italy. Do you see any of those sort of things happening, or do you think they're going to stand pat?
Not in January. I'd be really surprised if anything like that happened in January. There's no way that Aguero's leaving the club in this transfer window. And probably for two reasons. One, it'd be very, very difficult to replace him in January, and then the acclimatization the new striker would need to go through to get used to Pep's way of playing, etc., means that even if they brought in a high profile player, which of course we would expect it would be, even then it's probably going to be middle of March before that player really feels like they're up to speed. So any signings that City make now, realistically, you would say would be signings with one eye on the beginning of next season, certainly not to have an amazing impact in the second half of this season. In terms of Locatelli, yeah, there's rumours swirling around that Pep sees him as that long-term successor to Fernandinho that I think he thought Rodri was going to be initially, and Rodri has, well, as we've just said, struggled to acclimatise a little bit to the English game and how Pep plays in a particular way. So yeah, I would be absolutely amazed if either of those things happen. And equally, I think with Aguero, I think I wrote about this the other day. I would see him more likely going to PSG rather than rumours suggesting that Barcelona, having realised that Luis Suarez, an ageing South American, was probably daft to give them to Atletico Madrid, they now want to go and get another ageing South American to replace him. I think Aguero would be daft to move to Barcelona, a club in so much transition and upheaval at the moment. He may as well go to PSG, where there's going to be plenty of chances to score plenty of goals and win stuff. Whereas at Barcelona at the moment, I think they're probably at least another season and a little bit longer away from being a sort of a consistent challenger again at the top of La Liga.
And Barcelona reportedly needs to shed 100 million euros to achieve salary cap. So I have to imagine the new president's going to do a hard reset and keep it pretty young. Whether Messi's part of the solution or part of the problem, and possibly be going to Man City, time will tell on that.
Yeah, but the biggest mistake you're making there, Chris, is that you're looking at Barcelona through logical eyes, and that isn't a world that we live in.
I agree with you, but money and more money is one of the key tenets of reality. So we'll kind of see what happens there.
But then
Let's,
with Barcelona, that's been their issue over the last few years. They've started spending money in a way that they've never really done it before, and they've not spent it wisely.
yeah,
And now they're in a position where they are having to make all kinds of different trades to meet certain criteria here, there, and everywhere. And they're not doing a good job of it. Simple as that.
right. Let's turn our attention to probably the signature game. It's in a very American event in that it's the number one versus the number two, and all the hype associated with that. Liverpool versus Man United. How, what are your takes on the things we should be watching there?
I think first of all, there weren't many of us that would have looked at this game and expected it to be first versus second.
Hmm.
Certainly wouldn't have expected first to be Man United and second to be Liverpool.
Hmm.
And interestingly, United have since October have picked up 12 more points than Liverpool.
Hmm.
Granted, Liverpool have a game in hand on the United in that sort of statistical matchup, but
Hmm.
even so, it's hard to argue that United at the moment aren't the better team when you look at it in the pure cold light of day at those numbers. However, you still don't. I don't think there's many people that go into that game and think, yeah, well, United are definitely going to beat Liverpool because they are allegedly in better form at the moment. But I think it's got to be a lot closer than it has been for a while in terms of the standard of the two teams. Um, what makes it even more interesting for United is Solskjaer's comeback this season, where he's been on the verge of being sacked at least twice this season, if you believe the media rumor mill, rather than actually what United was saying in public. And then he's had two glorious comebacks in there as well, and now they're on a fantastic run of form where they're winning games and fix the issue of going behind to have to win a game, which was causing them a few nervy moments earlier in the season as well. So, in terms of how the game's going to match up, I mean, it sounds like lazy analysis, but you can see this how it's probably going to play out. That we all know that United are typically better on the break than when they've got to try and dominate a game themselves. Whereas Liverpool like to play on the front foot and sort of high press and win the ball early and create sort of chaos organized chaos in that respect. So it doesn't take a genius to work out that you would expect United to go with pace up front, which would suggest that maybe Cavani won't start. And Cavani played midweek, so that might be there. And you would assume that United will look to hit the gaps that Trent Alexander-Robertson leave. Now, Alexander-Arnold, people are saying is slightly out of form at the moment. Be that as it may, he's always been a better attacking player than he is a defensive player anyway, which still suggests that the spacing behind is a good way to go. And Liverpool have got this well documented injury crisis at central defence. Not that it's really caused them too many problems. They've been pretty solid despite all of that stuff. So it's one of those games where both teams would love to win, of course. Neither team are going to walk away with a point that's a disaster. And even a defeat for United wouldn't be a disaster because they would still end the game on level points with Liverpool. But a win for United, that would make it really, really interesting.
So I am just hopeful. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's not going to be one of those number one versus twos. That's an absolutely dreadful, slow game.
Well,
Um,
the more the media are going to hype this game up, the bigger the chances it's going to be that, because we know how this goes.
yeah, for all the reasons you've said, I mean, I do think that the one offensive weapon that Liverpool's missing is that long diagonal pass that Van Dijk was signature at, and Matip
Mm.
can also do to a Salah or Mane. Of course, they've got uh, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson are 13th and 14th in terms of successful attacking actions per 90 minutes for defenders. So they're taking care of business. But it's really on margins. And I think this, as you described, if it's going to be a team that's going to rely on the counter, there's got to be an element of luck. They're going to have to work hard to create some of that luck. And I see this easily being a 1-1 game or a 3-1 game. Probably equal probabilities on that. So I guess that's why I have to play the match. Liverpool has, if this is their poor run of form, which has been largely ties, and with I think they're going to do okay. I still I know that you favor Man City. I still think Liverpool is the favorite, and I'm hoping that the Man City revival is legit because I'd really like to see some action. I don't see Man United as a legit contender. Can they win the game on Sunday? Absolutely. Do they have the staying power for another 19, 20 games? I don't think so. Not this year.
No,
not far
I
off.
think that's fair summary. It's difficult. It's difficult to call in that respect. I mean, United are probably the unknown in this run now. They have the players to put together runs of form which keep them very much in the mix. Of course they do, but they've not been able to demonstrate the consistency so far. But you say that, and they are putting together 9s and 10s where, in terms of matches where they're getting results, and they've only then got to turn that into a 15 and a 16, and then suddenly they are right in it. And it would be really interesting to see how it plays out. But again, if I was to rank the 3 teams right now, and that's just only saying it's a 3-horse race, and of course it's not a 3-horse race. I mean, it's still so tight. But let's say it is those 3. United are probably higher chance of finishing 3rd than 2nd or 1st, I would say.
Right. And Liverpool, I mean, I think is it fair to conclude they aren't as good as they were last season? And is that injuries driven? Is that regression to the mean? What do you think? What's your take on why they aren't as good as last year?
It's a dangerous statement to say they're not as good as last year, because you've got then that debate between results and performance. Now, you could argue that performances last year from Liverpool weren't that different to what we're seeing now. The only difference being that they were finding a winner in those tight games that have been draws this season. They nicked a winner here, they nicked a winner there in the games last season. Does that make them a worse team this season to how they were last year? I don't think so. It is a curious one. For me, this season, Liverpool is more about how do you go about defending a title, and a title that you've won for the first time in 30 years, and the emotional release that must have within a dressing room where they finally climb that mountain. How do you then maintain that for the second season, especially then when you've got a team like City who will be hungry to regain their crown, and then you've got a United, and you've got all the others that are trying to climb to the top of their own mountains as well. So it doesn't surprise me that this season it's Liverpool aren't racing ahead at this point. It doesn't at all. I mean, even the great Liverpool teams of the 70s and the 80s could quite often turn Christmas and not be top of the league. Even Alex Ferguson, probably the greatest, certainly the greatest Premier League winner of all time, he used to say that as long as they were within touching distance at the turn of the new year, they back themselves to go on and win, because so much can still happen. So yeah, are Liverpool running away with it this year? Of course they're not. But were they ever likely to, in a season where it is such an unknown quantity this season as well? We're not even comparing 2 similar types of season. So is it even fair to look at Liverpool and go, are you as good as last year? I'd probably say it's not fair at all.
Speaking of fair and unfair, is Frank Lampard actually going to get sacked or not?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's just a matter of when. I said this over the summer, that every single big signing Frank gets given is just nudging him one step closer to the sack before they've even played a game of football. Because it just increases the pressure, increases the expectation. And the media sources that are suggesting that Chelsea are already scouting around for replacements, there feels like there's enough credibility in what they're saying, because this wouldn't be the first time that Roman Abramovich has pulled the trigger mid-season when he feels like things aren't going as well as they could be. And Lampard's points per game compared to some of the other managers that have been sacked mid-season, yeah, I think Lampard's going to be looking over his shoulder a little bit. Now, does that make it fair? I don't know. For me personally, Lampard was the right manager for Chelsea last season when there was a transfer ban, because he had the immediate aura and personality to be able to get the young players playing for him, because it was Frank Lampard. They would have been 8, 9, 10 at Chelsea coming through the youth system, looking at this guy in the first team, and he would have been a hero to them. But does that necessarily work now they've been given a load of money to spend the minute the transfer ban was lifted? I don't know if it has the same effect. So is Lampard actually the right manager for Chelsea right now? There's a very strong argument to say no, he's not. There are better, more experienced managers than Frank Lampard available to be able to do more with this exceptionally talented Chelsea squad. Again, does that make it fair? Probably not. Does it make it likely to happen? Yeah, I would say almost categorically that Frank Lampard won't be in charge at the end of the season. But stranger things have happened at Chelsea. He could well be, and they could end up winning a trophy.
Yeah, it's in terms of the issue of fairness, it's hard to say. I mean, I can't imagine Frank Lampard. The transfer strategy seemed to be, let's buy the best shiny new objects we could buy, as opposed to what's our style of play and what are the players that best suit that. So I for that reason, I don't think I can put much of the blame on Lampard, who, truth is, he was a very inexperienced coach. So I think it's kind of incumbent upon the club rather than on the coach, because they knew what they were buying. And it's just so vexing that Chelsea had more points at this time last year than they did this year, given all these spins. And I do think if you look at successful attacking actions per 90 minutes, Hudson-Odoi is number 1 on that list.
Yeah.
He hasn't even gotten that many minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then Giroud is number 2. So if you're telling me and again, successful attacking actions per 90 minutes is just one way of looking at how well an offensive player is doing, but it's a pretty good one. And I just feel like they've lost their way a little bit. So I'm hopeful. I'm not a huge Lampard fan. I'm cheering for him because I think he'd be wronged if he were let go. I think this is a club problem. It could be the owner problem, but as we all know, the person with all the marbles gets to make all the decisions.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's a tough one for Lampard, because you just don't get the feeling that he knows what his strongest 11 is. And I know we don't really live in a world nowadays where it's all about one strongest 11. Of course it's not. There are different horses for different courses. But even so, when it comes to the big games, there's been a couple of surprising decisions when it comes to the attacking line. And that you would think that in the biggest of biggest games, that's going to give you the closest indication to the players that he feels like he can really trust, and the players that are in form and able to go out and do the job. And you're right. I mean, 2 players there that you've named, Hudson-Odoi and Giroud, haven't been involved in those games. Certainly not from the start. Whereas you've got a Timo Werner, who they've spent big money on. And again, it's understandable that a young lad coming over from Germany from a lot of money hasn't immediately set the world alight. And it takes these players time to adapt, especially in a very strange season. Same with Kai Havertz, again, a player who was incredible in Bundesliga and probably will go on to be incredible in England if clubs can be patient enough with him. And if Chelsea, who aren't a club traditionally the most patient of clubs, if they can stick with these guys, they will come good. But for that sort of money that you've gone out and spent, you would expect Chelsea to be delivering more points than they have done at this moment.
Let's turn our attention to one other experienced manager, and that's Arteta over at Arsenal. They had a decent run of form, and then, of course, they tie Crystal Palace 0-0. Was it too early to talk about the revival of Arsenal as they moved up the league table?
It's always too soon to talk about revivals, and it's always too soon to talk about crisis.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the football world that we live in at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can talk about an Arsenal revival until we get to the end of Arteta's first full complete season,
Mm-hmm.
and you can really reflect and look back and see and feel where the progress actually has been made.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way that it would have been absolutely bonkers for Arteta to be sacked mid-season, because realistically, were Arsenal going to get relegated if Arteta stayed in charge and they still weren't very good? No, of course not. They would find a way of getting out of that. Are they going to get into the top four this season? No, and they were unlikely to anyway. So that bit, why not then give the manager that period of time between not getting top four and not getting relegated to go about his business and see what they're gonna build.
Should he
No,
should he double down on the youth movement and giving more folks, younger folks, playing time?
yeah, I look at that group of Arsenal youngsters, and it's the best group of Arsenal youngsters I've seen there since the days of Tony Adams, David Rocastle, Paul Merson, Paul Davis, Mickey Thomas, the guys who won the title for Arsenal back in the famous last minute goal at Anfield sort of era.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an exceptionally talented bunch of young players, and you look at the impact that not just Saka's having, but Emil Rose Smith, who's come in and is playing in this number 10 role, he's been really, really good. But again, if you're going to go with a lot of youngsters, which for me is a good thing to do, you've got to be patient. You've got to give them time. You've got to let them learn on the job, because they are going to make mistakes. They are going to lose games that they shouldn't lose because of a bit of naivety at times. And what they don't have, where other teams who have successfully integrated young players over the years, they don't have that really strong core of senior players that you just can absolutely rely on. It makes it challenging to come in. So a Curtis Jones coming into Liverpool at the moment, well, he's got a decent chance of doing well because he's got experienced title winners around him that he can lean on, and they can help him through the game. When you go back to United back in the 90s, when Beckham, the Nevilles, Nicky Butt, Paul Scholes and those players were coming into the team, they had the likes of Steve Bruce, Eric Cantona, Gary Pallister, Brian Robson, Roy Keane. They had Peter Schmeichel. They had senior players that had won stuff for the club that could show them the ropes during a game of football. And Arsenal don't have that. Chelsea didn't really have that too much last year. So these clubs have got to have patience and let these guys learn together.
Well,
really.
I will say this: I had the benefit of watching that young Arsenal team. They actually came over to the U.S. and watched them play in Denver, my son and I. And I've seen a lot of football live, but those kids were absolutely electric. And I think you bring up a good point. When you play youngsters, there's this expectation that it's going to take time, and building that expectation in the fan base and the owners, where it's going to take some time. I really feel like in many respects, Lampard would have had a longer runway if they had just stuck with youngsters without bringing in all the talent.
Yeah. Worst thing that happened to Frank was the transfer ban being lifted. Had it stayed in place,
isn't that ironic? Isn't that ironic? While he's yet with Arteta, Arsenal doesn't have a whole bunch of money to go out and buy folks. And they do have a youngster movement that I think is going to sustain itself in maybe 3 years. So it's going to be really interesting to see. It sounds like your take is that Arteta's job is going to be fairly stable because of that.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I can't see Arsenal at all making a change before the end of the season. And look, we get to the end of the year and then we look back. I mean, it is too soon to say whether this is an Arsenal revival or not, because if they go and lose the next 2 games, or they pick up 1 win in the next 5, then it feels like they've made 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and that probably would be the case. But that doesn't have to be a disaster and a crisis again either. It's learning. So it'll be. I mean, you've also got to give Arteta a little bit of respect that he did win the FA Cup last year. And that he did beat 2 teams that were deadly serious about trying to win the FA Cup. It wasn't just big name teams who were putting out weak opposition and Arsenal just happened to be the last man standing. They went into the semi-final and the final as the underdogs and came away with the trophy. So there's something there for Arteta. he's probably been. He's probably learned a lot about himself already, about how he's dealing with players and how he's dealing with some of the more senior players in the club, because it's all very well thinking about how you're going to manage a personality and what kind of leader you're going to be in life and things like that. And then actually doing it in a real live environment with when it's you actually making the decisions as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different environment. So he's probably learned a lot about that. And I think he'll be feeling right now that his media game has helped. But whether that is actually the case longer term, I don't know, because I mean, I think he's made some brave moves in the media in terms of talking about players and certain things in the media. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out longer term. But all in all, I mean, who are they going to bring in that's going to do better than what he's doing at the moment? Probably not many people. Unlike with Chelsea, where you feel like there are people out there that could come in and do a better job and get more out of the resource that's currently there.
Right. Well, good. Well, Chris, I think we'll leave it there. It's a lovely chat, Chris plus Chris on the Premier League. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
no worries.